405, Chapter 5 of the Count of Monte Cristo. Book talk begins at 21 minutes. Welcome to Craftlit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Episode 405, Sharing is Caring. This episode of Craftlit is brought to you by its listeners. Many thanks and much gratefulness to all of the listeners who have gone over to patreon.com/Craftlit and pledged their support to the show. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you. Well, hello. I am so excited to bring you today's chapter. We have such a good chapter today. I love it. And actually, there is not a whole lot that I am going to be able to give you up front, because if I give you too much, I will spoil it. And now that we're kind of getting into the book and I'm starting to plan more and more of the chapters, I'm noticing that there are going to be quite a few where, because it's an adventure story in some parts, it will be very difficult for me to not spoil things if I give you too much at the beginning. So I think we will wind up backloading a lot of our conversation instead of front-loading it, which is just fine and a lot of fun. Today's chapter is going to be a lot of fun. So first, we have some crafty chat, and thank you very much. There are people who made comments over in Ravelry at the Craftlit group of things that they wanted to see if we could adjust a little bit, because as you know, this is a learning experience for all of us. And the intersection between a YouTube video and its audio and an audio-only podcast is an interesting intersection. And so we're trying to figure out a way to make sure that it's fun for people who are watching, but it's also informative for people who are just listening on the podcast. And I think this week we got a little closer. Know that you can always send questions to us. Erica's been doing a really good job about tweeting and posting on Ravelry. If you have questions you want to ask Dawn about crochet, or Erica about knitting, or me about anything, this is a great time to do a question and answer, especially if you're not able to or interested in calling our phone line and leaving a voicemail. This is another way to get a conversation going between us. And again, the voicemail number is area code 206-350-1642, or you can go to speakpipe.com/craftlit, or you can use the little SpeakPipe widget at the craftlit.com page. And that'll show up no matter what page you're on. Now, there were some problems with the links going from the Craftlit show notes to the YouTube video. And if that happens again, and it may, because YouTube's linking system is very easy if you're within the YouTube environment, or if you're tweeting or Facebooking. But once you take those links and put them onto a website, all sorts of weird things start to happen. So I think I figured it out. But just in case, the Craftlit channel you can get to by going to bit.ly/craftlit/YouTube. That will get you to the Craftlit channel. That's a little shrinky link that I created for you because it's easier to remember that way, I think. So bit.ly/craftlit-YouTube. All right, let's hear a little bit from Dawn and Erica on this week's Crafty Chat.
Beautiful. Gorgeous.
Dawn, let's go ahead with you with your sharing. Everybody's wearing cowls and I'm just wearing cotton, so.
Well, it's sunny here in St. Paul today, which means it's cold. So cowl in the house because, we're frugal and we don't necessarily heat the house as warmly as I would like.
I feel your pain.
This one's just super easy. It's just single crochet, chain, single crochet, chain, and you just go in a big spiral and single crochet in the chain spaces.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a big, fat, felted singles yarn called Pure, P-U-R. and it's this lovely kind of stripy color progression. It's really soft, and it was really fun to make and really fast because I don't think it's that much yardage even. It's pretty bulky.
Who makes the yarn? Is the company Pure?
No. The Pure is a yarn by Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer? Yes. And my project notes are not very fantastic, but it is actually in my projects with the picture. And my fabulous notes say I use 66 stitches. Period.
That's useful information. That's good.
So there you go. Make your own. 66 stitches, go.
Because I like that.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a really felted single.
And how would you describe the colors?
Yes.
These are pretty well. It's a combination. Like last week, Heather said I was wearing ocean colors. And this one's kind of a combination. There's some oceany bits in it too, some blues and turquoises, and then some kind of warmer purples and oranges too. So it kind of covers the spectrum. They're very jewel tony.
That was one of the things I noticed about that is that some of the colors are kind of those dusty colors that I'm always really attracted to.
Yeah.
But some of them really pop in a lovely way.
Yeah, I like it, and it's very soft. So it's because it's felted, so none of the ends stick out.
Better.
So it's really warm and it's really easy to wear, which is nice.
So what else do you have? What else do you have with you, Dawn?
Let's see. I don't remember last week. Did I tell you about the stitch markers I made last week?
No, last week you showed us all of the behind the chair, but not behind the chair.
Oh, that's right. All the Briar Rose stuff. I did make some stitch markers because I'm embarking on a kind of Aran sweater vest. And I want 1 million stitch markers to put in between each section so I can keep my stitch counts right, Nice. So I made some new stitch markers. You use that coated jewelry wire. It's called, the kind I use is called Analon, Analon. And you can put a bead on it, not put a bead on it. These are just some cheap old plastic play beads that I have.
Cool.
And so they have little hearts on them, and I just strung it on a little loop of the wire, and then closed the loop with a crimp, just a crimp bead. So you just smash it closed and then trim off the wire really close to the top of the crimp. So there's nothing to snag on anything. That's what I like about these.
Nice.
That's nice. How long would you say it takes you to make one?
10 seconds.
Oh, way to go.
Yeah. You just need a wire snips and the, little flat jewelry making tool to squish the crimp closed. But they're really fast, they're easy, and they're super cheap. And I have a bonus project this week because I have a friend who started a yoke sweater for herself and got to the part where you put the sleeves and the body all on one big needle and went, I am insane because this is never going to fit me.
Oh, no.
It'll probably fit a 15-year-old girl. So I got the body and the arms in this beautiful, it's a Icelandic dark gray. It's the Icelandic Unspun from Schoolhouse Press.
Oh.
So this is a very woolly wool, very grabby wool. But it's also, this sweater is like as light as air because the yarn is so light. It has a good amount of body to it, but the yarn is like holding air. Literally.
Is it a 2-ply? I can't
tell.
No,
it's an unspun.
Oh, it is the unspun. That's right.
Yeah.
So it's like thinner than Lopi.
You can pull it apart. Lopi actually makes a version of this. It's the one that comes in these big cakey things.
Yes. I have
the plates. They call them plates. And you can pull it apart just like fluff if you're not careful. But knitting with it, it stays together for me. So that's not bad. So right now I'm playing the game of seeing if I can match gauge, and so far it's going pretty well. I think I'm doing a pretty good job.
What size needle? Now this wasn't a neck down. This was a bottom up.
Bottom up.
Yeah.
Yep. and she's got it. She did a provisional cast on because she didn't know if she wanted to do ribbing or a turned hem on the bottom. So we'll go back and revisit that at the end. But for now, I've got 3 tubes attached together, and I'm knitting dark gray wool around and around and around and around and around in circles.
In the winter.
Right.
Don't do it at night. You won't see it.
No, this definitely has a very narrow time frame.
Erica, before you talk, I'm going to show everybody the Jane's Ubiquitous Shawl. The first picture, it's the first design in the first book. Amy's going to
So for those who are listening and not watching, it's a giant square shawl knit from the center out. The center section is diamonds, and then there's a stockinette section with a leaf at each corner increase and a leaf in the middle of each side. And then there's a fern section. And I can't tell what yarn she knit it in, but it's like an eggplant color, aubergine color. The pattern says sport weight, but that might be lighter weight than that. I can't tell. I
think hers is sport weight, and in fact, I have one more version of it, and I'll put these on the show notes too. It is stunning. I've knit one of them.
The best knitting compliment I ever got was a woman on Ravelry knit it in white lace weight for her daughter to wear with her wedding dress.
Wow. I'm not surprised.
And she still hasn't posted a picture of it on Ravelry, which makes me sad because I want to see. But
yeah, we all want to see.
You do. And you can see in this picture, I took the picture, but my hand is holding up the end of the diamonds, the beginning of the fern, the beginning of the leaves increases. She did a gorgeous job knitting that. So that was fun. So what have you been working on, Erica?
Well, first, what am I wearing?
Yes.
This is it's a long skinny crescent in 2 or 3 skeins of hemp for knitting, all hemp 6. And I believe the color's called Avocado. And it's just got lots of increases, so it's kind of ruffly.
Oh,
but it's got kind of a leafy increase thing going on. But I made some progress on the entrelac scarf. I haven't touched my other finishuary projects, but the entrelac scarf, which is, for those listening at home, it is Noro Korean sock, and it's just a basic long rectangle of entrelac, and the colors are a dark charcoal, a light gray, a couple shades of blue, and a greenish blue, and then I don't know what color to call that purple. It's not lavender and it's not periwinkle, but it's kind of somewhere between those two. And it is 11 3/4 inches wide. And at the moment, it's 52.5 inches long. And I can't decide how long I'm going to make. I think I'm going to do it just to 5 feet and then call it done. But I've got almost a whole skein left, so I could make it gigunda huge, but it's already at over 900 yards of yarn in there.
Whoa.
Fingering weight on size 2.5. So.
Dear Lord, woman.
But it's definitely potato chip knitting, because as you go along, you say, well, just one more layer. Just one more layer of squares. Well, just one more layer. I want to see what color's next. So that's how that goes.
I think that's the genius of Noro, is those color changes are so beautiful, especially on entrelac patterns, that you kind of get addicted to watching the thing unfold. And I think that's my favorite colorway, just in general, of their pantheon, is those blues and purples and grays. That's what I think of when I think of Noro.
And if anybody's a Noro aficionado, it's colorway S like Stanley 233. So Heather, what are you wearing?
So I am not wearing anything particularly interesting, and it's been one of those weeks. So instead, I was going to share something that I was given, actually. This is
another one. Last week was a giftie.
It's true, but this isn't knitted. This is sewn. And I posted it on Instagram, but it's really hard to photograph, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is perfect because I can take the pictures and put them onto the show notes. But I can show you how shallow this is, and because it really is what, like it's maybe 3 inches deep, and it's a really, really nicely made bowl. So there's the circle cut at the bottom, and then the seams go out along the middle parts. So the corners are just the corners. But what the idea is, there's quilting batting inside, and you put a bowl of, say, soup in that, and you shove the whole thing in the microwave and heat it up so that you can take it out without burning your hands. And
Smart.
Nanette the nanny made that one, and she also made me this one with, I thought, some of the cutest fabric. It's all sewing, all cooking things.
Very cute.
So the second one, it has little stamp like rectangular things.
Vintage,
sous chef and
vintage signs. It looks like all 1950s. And she had, the small one had the little boys, the 1950s boys and girls.
Yeah, it looks like Fun with Dick and Jane kind of kids.
Yes. And this one looks like a bunch of diner signs, which I like. And then plain in the middle. On the larger one, she quilted it more or less, and then on the outside, she spiral quilted it.
Oh,
and
that's
I have
cool.
not gotten a hold of her to find out if that was merely a design choice or if that was also a tactic. But either way, this is for a slightly bigger bowl that you could use with a serving dish, maybe. And then there was something that I should have said something about 1,000 years ago. A year ago, Valentine's Day, I was watching Twitter go by, bored. What do you do on Valentine's Day? You watch Twitter. And one of the people who I follow, the guy, what's his name, who does Scribblegraph, which is a website, and he's just a guy in, I think, New Zealand. He's an artist. I love his characters, and I love the way his stuff looks. So, and he had this competition. If you tweet something about love, blah blah blah, he's going to randomly pick out of that. And he sent 5 of his cards. Now, it took him 6 months to send them, so I'm not feeling so bad because we're winding up being about equal. But this is one of the cards.
The card has a present on it with a little mouse. Yep. And it says, Merry Christmas. All I want for Christmas is a bit of nice Gruyere, but Santa went next level and got me Camembert.
Yes, that's the little mouse is sniffing the side of the box.
It's Santa Mouse.
It's Santa Mouse. But he also does things like this one says, "Beware the Christmas Kraken," and so it's his version of a kraken. At a distance, I thought it was Cthulhu, but it is not. It is a kraken.
Love it.
Yes, and I really love his style. He does pen and ink art, and I'm going to link to his site from the show notes. But he often employs trebuchets.
As one should for the holiday season.
Because what says Christmas like a trebuchet?
Right. So he has it's a trebuchet snowball machine, and it's another Christmas card. But that character is kind of traditionally his type of character. So it's a round head and really simple arms and feet. And I love his stuff, and I love his Twitter feed. He's always releasing cool stuff. He does pictures for people for birthdays and anniversaries, and
very cool.
That's my sharing. The things that make me happy.
I'm just crazy for stitches right now. I'm in between projects right now because I'm waiting for stitches, which is in 2 days.
Yay! So, are you taking classes or just going and signing books?
I'm not. So that's a good segue, Heather. Thank you. I couldn't have scheduled that better. So I will be in and around the Dizzy Blonde Studios booth most of the time. I will for sure be there Friday from 12:30 to 2. From 9:30 to 2:30 on Friday, and Sunday from 12:30 to 2:30. But I'll be floating in and out of there a lot. And so please come say hi. It's booth numbers 1033 and 1035. I will have Thing 2 with me from Friday afternoon onward, from Friday about 4:30 onward. So if those who have seen seen and heard about Thing 1 and Thing 2 via the blog and Facebook and stuff, and actually get to meet Thing 2 in person. And please don't be shy. I'll have my Ravelry button on that says I'm Erica H64. So please do not be shy to come say hi. I'm probably shyer than you are. For all my loudness, I am shy in some ways. So
That's so true in every venue that I've been in, because I find out later that there were people who were there who wanted to say hi, and then they'd gotten nervous or shy at the time and said, "Oh, I'm not gonna." And you'll know my voice, but I won't know your face. I'll know your name. So you have to come up and talk, or I got nothing. But it's always fun to get to meet people who are affiliated
absolutely.
with Craftlit. Oh, and something I forgot to show everybody on the live stream is a bag that was shared in the Craftlit group on Facebook, which you can get to from the sidebar in the show notes at craftlit.com. And in that group, we have a fabulous Count of Monte Cristo bag. And the bag is based on an original cover from the book and has fabric on the inside as well. It is so fantastic. I will link to that photo and I will link to that post on the Facebook site. And for reasons that I will never completely understand, the Facebook group, you have to click and ask to join. However, I don't have to be the one to click the button. Feel free. We welcome everybody. So the bag is pretty awesome, as is another extraordinary piece of creativity, Our Lady of Paris, the Cathedral Notre Dame. Last week we talked about the Ile de la Cité, which is the island upon which Notre Dame Cathedral stands. It's on the eastern edge, and the face that you see the most often is the western-facing edge of the enormous cathedral. The cathedral has so many different amazing things about it. And many of them actually had been affected by recent history when Dumas started writing the Count of Monte Cristo. So we'll talk about that for a second. I knew the term flying buttresses and rose windows and things like that. I didn't really know a whole lot about why flying buttresses. And there were several other really interesting little tidbits about the cathedral. Like the word cathedral doesn't mean really super huge church. It means the seat, the chair, the seat in this case of the archbishop. Any place where you are where there's an archbishop for that region, he has to have a home field advantage somewhere. And in this case, it is the cathedral, because the Latin for chair is cathedra. So there you go. I had no idea. I've been to so many cathedrals. I had no idea. It's totally embarrassing. The other thing is that during the French Revolution, and this is the part that would have been more recent history for Dumas. During the French Revolution, the Cathedral Notre Dame had several things happen to it. One, it was converted from a church into a food storage space. And that may sound really kind of sacrilegious, except that one of the main reasons why people were so up in arms and rioting and miserable is because they were starving. In no uncertain terms. I mean, really, honestly, starving. And so to have a space that is that big and made of stone, so it's a good temperature, to have access to a space like that, to be able to store food, was huge and really important. And if that isn't God's work, I guess I don't know what would be. But of course, other things were happening during the French Revolution as well. Things like the Reign of Terror. And during the Reign of Terror, when a lot of people were losing their heads, the statuary was as well. There were statues, and people made the incorrect assumption that these statues were of kings, and so they decapitated the stone, what they thought were kings, when in fact they were either apostles or they were other luminaries from the Bible. Now I can't remember which. And I didn't put down in my notes because I thought I would remember. Anyway, They weren't kings. They were biblical figures. They really didn't need to be decapitated. And the assumption was that those heads were lost forever. But in the 1970s, I think, there were excavations being done, and they found the heads. And now the heads are in a museum, not on the cathedral, but that is because there have been several renovations that have been done since the 1800s on the cathedral, both inside and out. One of the fantastic things is that the stained glass was not damaged. And the stained glass is amazing. This is blown stained glass, the kind where you see rings, so it looks kind of like a Coke bottle. Well, that's because that's how it's made. If you've ever seen at a Renaissance fair or wherever somebody doing blown glass, that long pipe, and they blow into it, and the hot molten glass spreads out into a big giant ball of hot glass. Well, if they start turning it kind of rapidly as it's cooling, but not cooling very fast, if they keep turning and turning and turning and turning, that globe that they've created starts to flatten out. And as it flattens out, it stretches and it gets wider and wider and wider and wider, but it still has that center point. It still has the place of attachment to the rod that is holding it up. And that's why when you see stained glass windows up close, you can often, if they're old enough, you can often see those kind of funky centers in the middle of a larger piece of glass. So Notre Dame's glass did really well. Its statuary did less well, the French Revolution being a prime reason why. But then you also have interesting things happen, like one of the architects in charge of renovations in the 1800s, his name was, I think it's Viollet-le-Duc. He decided to replace St. Thomas, the carpenter, with a statue of himself. And so all of the other apostles, all the other saints are facing Paris, looking out at the city from their lofty height. And one of them is turned around backwards with his hand up over his eyes, like he's shading the sun from his eyes, looking up at his gorgeous architectural work. And that's him. So we have some interesting statuary stories from the tops of these grand buildings. Another thing you might know of the cathedral at Notre Dame, or at least Gothic cathedral architecture in general, is this flying buttress thing, which I didn't really understand. But if you think of making a gingerbread house, you will be able to visualize, I think, that if you have side walls on your gingerbread house that are 2 stories tall, so you have a layer of frosting in between, a long piece of cookie on the bottom, and then a matching long piece of cookie on the top. But on those very thin edges that you are, building up with, you have the frosting, and then you're going to balance a roof on that top second set of pieces. What's going to happen? As soon as you set the roof, it's going to start pushing down more heavily because gravity, and it's going to buckle. And those little seams, the little frosting seams on our sidewalls are going to start to pop out. And then the roof will pop in, and that will be the end of everybody who is in the building. In this case, our little gumdrops. But in real life, actual humans. So the architects figured that one of the things they needed to do was to distribute the weight differently. It wasn't to push in on the walls, although that also happened. But it was to take the weight of the roof and the weight of the really, really tall walls and distribute it out and down. And so when you see these flying buttresses that look like, honestly, they look like little Lego archways, depending on how they're made. Sometimes they're really big and heavy and bulky, and then as they developed the science behind them more, you get some really graceful looking things. But they're just these little pieces that come out from the upper part of the wall and kind of swoop down, and then there's another set of pillars that go all the way down to the ground and create sometimes an exterior colonnade and sometimes an interior colonnade. And you can kind of tell how wide those interior walkways or pathways or colonnades will be just by looking and eyeballing from the outside, because whatever the difference is between the original exterior wall and the outside wall of the flying buttress, that's how much space they have inside. because that's in between the pillars. So our first full day in France on the Craftlit tour this October 2016. This is one of the first things we're going to get to see, and you are invited. Follow the link in the show notes. In the sidebar, there's a little picture of the Eiffel Tower. You can click on that, or you can call 1-800-826-2266. I am, as you can probably tell, over the moon. I can't wait, especially now that I've started looking into things. And there's more stories. I mean, there's stories about the guy who did I think it was the bronze doorways, having sold his soul to the devil because it was too perfect and beautiful and nobody knows how he did it. And it goes on. It's fabulous. Almost as fabulous as our chapters today. Now, I said there really wasn't much that I needed to say to you before we listen, and that is true, because here's what I'm going to say. Let's listen to the chapter, and we'll talk on the flip side. Here we go, with Chapter 5 of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, read for us by David Clark.
Chapter 5, The Marriage Feast. The morning sun rose clear and resplendent, touching the foamy waves into a network of ruby-tinted light. The feast had been made ready on the second floor at La Réserve, with whose arbour the reader is already familiar. The apartment, destined for the purpose, was spacious and lighted by a number of windows, over each of which was written in golden letters, for some inexplicable reason, the name of one of the principal cities of France. Beneath these windows, a wooden balcony extended the entire length of the house, and although the entertainment was fixed for 12 o'clock, an hour previous to that time, the balcony was filled with impatient and expectant guests, consisting of the favoured part of the crew of the Pharaon and other personal friends of the bridegroom, the whole of whom had arrayed themselves in their choicest costumes, in order to do greater honour to the occasion. Various rumours were afloat to the effect that the owners of the Pharaon had promised to attend the nuptial feast, but all seemed unanimous in doubting that an act of such rare and exceeding condescension could possibly be intended. Danglars, however, who now made his appearance accompanied by Caderousse, effectually confirmed the report, stating that he had recently conversed with Monsieur Morel, who had himself assured him of his intention to dine at La Réserve. In fact, a moment later, Monsieur Morel appeared and was saluted with an enthusiastic burst of applause from the crew of the Pharaon, who hailed the visit of the shipowner as a sure indication that the man whose wedding feast he thus delighted to honour would ere long be first in command of the ship. And as Dante was universally beloved on board his vessel, the sailors put no restraint on their tumultuous joy at finding that the opinion and choice of their superiors so exactly coincided with their own. With the entrance of Monsieur Morel, Danglars and Caderousse were dispatched in search of the bridegroom, to convey to him the intelligence of the arrival of the important personage whose coming had created such a lively sensation, and to beseech him to make haste. Danglars and Caderousse set off upon their errand at full speed, but ere they had gone many steps, they perceived a group advancing towards them, composed of the betrothed pair, a party of young girls in attendance on the bride, by whose side walked Dante's father, the whole brought up by Fernand, whose lips wore their usual sinister smile. Neither Mercédès nor Edmond observed the strange expression of his countenance. They were so happy that they were conscious only of the sunshine and the presence of each other. Having acquitted themselves of their errand, and exchanged a hearty shake of the hand with Edmond, Danglars and Caderousse took their places beside Fernand and old Dante, the latter of whom attracted universal notice. The old man was attired in a suit of glistening watered silk, trimmed with steel buttons, beautifully cut and polished. His thin but wiry legs were arrayed in a pair of richly embroidered clocked stockings, evidently of English manufacture, while from his three-cornered hat depended a long streaming knot of white and blue ribbons. Thus he came along, supporting himself on a curiously carved stick, his aged countenance lit up with happiness, looking for all the world like one of the aged dandies of 1796, parading the newly opened garden of the Tuileries and Luxembourg. Beside him glided Caderousse, whose desire to partake of the good things provided for the wedding party had induced him to become reconciled to the Dantes, father and son, although there still lingered in his mind a faint and unperfect recollection of the events of the preceding night, just as the brain retains on waking in the morning the dim and misty outline of a dream. As Danglars approached the disappointed lover, he cast on him a look of deep meaning, while Fernand, as he slowly paced behind the happy pair, who seemed in their own unmixed content to have entirely forgotten that such a being as himself existed, was pale and abstracted. Occasionally, however, a deep flush would overspread his countenance, and a nervous contraction distort his features, while, with an agitated and restless gaze, he would glance in the direction of Marseille, like one who either anticipated or foresaw some great and important event. Dante himself was simply but becomingly clad in the dress peculiar to the merchant service, a costume somewhat between a military and a civil garb, and with his fine countenance, radiant with joy and happiness, a more perfect specimen of manly beauty could scarcely be imagined. Lovely as the Greek girls of Cyprus, or Chios, Mercedes boasted the same bright, flashing eyes of jet and ripe, round coral lips. She moved with the light, free step of an Arlésienne or an Andalusian. One more practice in the arts of great cities would have hid her blushes beneath a veil, or at least have cast down her thickly fringed lashes, so as to conceal the liquid lustre of her animated eyes. But on the contrary, the delighted girl looked around her with a smile that seemed to say, "If you are my friends, rejoice with me, for I am very happy." As soon as the bridal party came in sight of La Réserve, Monsieur Morel descended and came forth to meet it, followed by the soldiers and sailors there assembled, to whom he had repeated the promise already given, that Dante should be the successor to the late Captain Leclerc. Edmond, at the approach of his patron, respectfully placed the arm of his affianced bride within that of Monsieur Morel, who forthwith, conducting her up the flight of wooden steps leading to the chamber in which the feast was prepared, was gaily followed by the guests, beneath whose heavy tread the slight structure creaked and groaned for the space of several minutes. "Father," said Mercedes, stopping when she had reached the centre of the table, "sit, I pray you, on my right hand. On my left I will place him who has ever been as a brother to me," pointing with a soft and gentle smile to Fernand. But her words and look seemed to inflict the direst torture on him, for his lips became ghastly pale, and even beneath the dark hue of his complexion the blood might be seen retreating as though some sudden pang drove it back to the heart. During this time, Dante, at the opposite side of the table, had been occupied in similarly placing his most honoured guests. Monsieur Morel was seated at his right hand, Danglars at his left, while at a sign from Edmond, the rest of the company ranged themselves as they found it most agreeable. When they began to pass around the dusky, piquant Arlésian sausages and lobsters in their dazzling red cuirass, prawns of large size and brilliant colour, the échinu, with its prickly outside and dainty morsel within, the clovy, esteemed by the epicure of the south as more than rivalling the exquisite flavour of the oyster, all the delicacies, in fact, that are cast up by the wash of waters on the sandy beach, and styled by the grateful fishermen fruits of the sea. "A pretty silence, truly," said the old father of the bridegroom, as he carried to his lips a glass of wine of the hue and brightness of the topaz, and which had just been placed before Mercedes herself. "Now, would anybody think that this room contained a happy, merry party, who desired nothing better than to laugh and dance the hours away."
"Ah," sighed Caderousse, "a man cannot always feel happy, because he is about to be married."
"The truth is," replied Dante, "that I am too happy for noisy mirth. If that is what you meant by your observation, my worthy friend, you are right. Joy takes a strange effect at times. It seems to oppress us almost the same as sorrow." Danglars looked towards Fernand, whose excitable nature received and betrayed each fresh impression. "Why, what ails you?" asked he of Edmond. "Do you fear any approaching evil? I should say that you were the happiest man alive at this instant." "And that is the very thing that alarms me," returned Dante. "Man does not appear to me to be intended to enjoy felicity so unmixed. Happiness is like the enchanted palaces we read in our childhood, where fierce, fiery dragons defend the entrance and approach, and monsters of all shapes and kinds, requiring to be overcome ere victory is ours. I own that I am lost in wonder to myself, promoted to an honor of which I feel myself unworthy, that of being the husband of Mercédès."
"Nay, nay," cried Caderousse, smiling, "you have not attained that honor yet. Mercédès is not your wife yet. Just assume the tone and manner of a husband, and see how she will remind you that your hour is not yet come."
The bride blushed, while Fernand, restless and uneasy, seemed to start at every fresh sound, and from time to time wiped away the large drops of perspiration that gathered on his brow. "Well, never mind that, neighbor Caderousse. It is not worthwhile to contradict me for such a trifle as that. It is true that Mercédès is not actually my wife yet, but," added he, drawing out his watch, "in an hour and a half she will be." A general exclamation of surprise ran round the table, with the exception of the elder Dante, whose laugh displayed the still perfect beauty of his large white teeth. Mercédès looked pleased and gratified, while Fernand grasped the handle of his knife with a convulsive clutch. "In an hour?" inquired Danglars, turning pale. "How is that, my friend?" "Why, thus it is," replied Dante. "Thanks to the influence of Monsieur Morel, to whom next to my father I owe every blessing I enjoy, every difficulty has been removed. We have purchased permission to waive the usual delay, and at 2:30 the mayor of Marseille will be waiting for us at the city hall. Now, as 1:15 has already struck, I do not consider I have asserted too much in saying that in another hour and 30 minutes Mercédès will have become Madame Dante." Fernand closed his eyes. A burning sensation passed across his brow, and he was compelled to support himself by the table to prevent his falling from his chair. But in spite of all his efforts, he could not refrain from uttering a deep groan, which, however, was lost amid the noisy felicitations of the company. "Upon my word," cried the old man, "you make short work of this kind of affair. Arrived here only yesterday morning, and married today at 3:00. Commend me to a sailor for going the quick way to work." "But," asked Danglars in a timid tone, "how did you manage about the other formality, the contract, the settlement?" "The contract," answered Dante laughingly. "It didn't take long to fix that. Mercédès has no fortune. I have none to settle on her, so you see our papers were quickly written out, and certainly do not come very expensive." This joke elicited a fresh burst of applause. "So that we presumed to be merely the betrothal feast turns out to be the actual wedding dinner," said Danglars. "No, no," answered Dante. "Don't imagine I am going to put you off in that shabby manner. Tomorrow morning I start for Paris, 4 days to go, and the same to return, with 1 day to discharge the commission entrusted to me, is all the time I shall be absent. I shall be back here by the 1st of March, and on the 2nd I give my real marriage feast." This prospect of fresh festivity redoubled the hilarity of the guests to such a degree that the elder Dante, who at the commencement of the repast had commented upon the silence that prevailed, now found it difficult, amid the general din of voices, to obtain a moment's tranquillity in which to drink to the health and prosperity of the bride and bridegroom. Dante, perceiving the affectionate eagerness of his father, responded by a look of grateful pleasure, while Mercédès glanced at the clock and made an expressive gesture to Edmond. Around the table reigned that noisy hilarity which usually prevails at such a time among people sufficiently free from the demands of social position not to feel the trammels of etiquette. Such as at the commencement of the repast had not been able to seat themselves according to their inclination rose unceremoniously and sought out more agreeable companions. Everybody talked at once, without waiting for a reply, and each one seemed to be contented with expressing his or her own thoughts. Fernand's paleness appeared to have communicated itself to Danglars. As for Fernand himself, he seemed to be enduring the tortures of the damned. Unable to rest, he was among the first to quit the table, and, as though seeking to avoid the hilarious mirth that rose in such deafening sounds, he continued in utter silence to pace the farther end of the salon. Caderousse approached him, just as Danglars, whom Fernand seemed most anxious to avoid, had joined him in a corner of the room. "Upon my word," said Caderousse, from whose mind the friendly treatment of Dante, united with the effect of the excellent wine he had partaken of, had effaced every feeling of envy or jealousy at Dante's good fortune. "Upon my word, Dante is a downright good fellow, and when I see him sitting there beside his pretty wife, that is so soon to be, I cannot help thinking it would have been a great pity to have served him that trick you were planning yesterday." "Oh, there was no harm meant," answered Danglars. "At first I certainly did feel somewhat uneasy as to what Fernand might be tempted to do, but when I saw how completely he had mastered his feelings, even so far as to become one of his rival's attendants, I knew there was no further cause for apprehension." Caderousse looked full at Fernand. He was ghastly pale. "Certainly," continued Danglars, "the sacrifice was no trifling one, when the beauty of the bride is concerned. Upon my soul, that future captain of mine is a lucky dog. God, I only wish he would let me take his place." "Shall we not set forth?" asked the sweet silvery voice of Mercédès. 2 o'clock has just struck, and you know we are expected in a quarter of an hour." To be sure," cried Dante, eagerly quitting the table. "Let us go directly." His words were re-echoed by the whole party with vociferous cheers. At this moment, Danglars, who had been incessantly observing every change in Fernand's look and manner, saw him stagger and fall back, with an almost convulsive spasm, against a seat placed near one of the open windows. At the same instant, his ear caught a sort of indistinct sound on the stairs, followed by the measured tread of soldiery, with the clanking of swords and military accoutrements. Then came a hum and buzz as of many voices, so as to deaden even the noisy mirth of the bridal party, among whom a vague feeling of curiosity and apprehension quelled every disposition to talk, and almost instantaneously the most death-like stillness prevailed. The sounds drew nearer. 3 blows were struck upon the panel of the door. The company looked at each other in consternation. "I demand admittance," said a loud voice outside the room. "In the name of the law." As no attempt was made to prevent it, the door was opened and a magistrate, wearing his official scarf, presented himself, followed by 4 soldiers and a corporal. Uneasiness now yielded to the most extreme dread on the part of those present. "May I venture to inquire the reason of this unexpected visit?" said M. Morrel, addressing the magistrate whom he evidently knew. "There is, doubtless, some mistake easily explained." "If it be so," replied the magistrate, "rely upon every reparation being made. Meanwhile, I am the bearer of an order of arrest, and although I must reluctantly perform the task assigned me, it must nevertheless be fulfilled. Who among the persons here assembled answers to the name of Edmond Dantès?" Every eye was turned towards the young man, who, spite of the agitation, he could not but feel advanced with dignity, and said in a firm voice, "I am he. What is your pleasure with me?" "Edmond Dantès," replied the magistrate, "I arrest you in the name of the law." "Me?" repeated Edmond, slightly changing colour. "And wherefore, I pray?" "I cannot inform you, but you will be duly acquainted with the reasons that have rendered such a step necessary at the preliminary examination." Monsieur Morel felt that further resistance or remonstrance was useless. He saw before him an officer delegated to enforce the law, and perfectly well knew that it would be as unavailing to seek pity from a magistrate decked with his official scarf as to address a petition to some cold marble effigy. Old Dante, however, sprang forward. There are situations which the heart of a father or a mother cannot be made to understand. He prayed and supplicated in terms so moving that even the officer was touched, and although firm in his duty, he kindly said, "My worthy friend, let me beg of you to calm your apprehensions. Your son has probably neglected some prescribed form or attention in registering his cargo, and it is more than probable he will be set at liberty directly he has given the information required, whether touching the health of his crew or the value of his freight." "What is the meaning of all this?" inquired Caderousse frowningly of Danglars, who had assumed an air of utter surprise. "How can I tell you?" replied he. "I am, like yourself, utterly bewildered at all that is going on, and cannot in the least make out what it is about." Caderousse then looked around for Fernand, but he had disappeared. The scene of the previous night now came back to his mind with startling clearness. The painful catastrophe he had just witnessed appeared effectually to have rent away the veil which the intoxication of the evening before had raised between himself and his memory. So, said he in a hoarse and choking voice to Danglars, "this, then, I suppose, is a part of the trick you were concerting yesterday. All I can say is, that if it be so, 'tis an ill turn, and well deserves to bring double evil on those who have projected it." "Nonsense," returned Danglars. "I tell you again, I have nothing whatever to do with it. Besides, you know very well that I tore the paper to pieces." "No, you did not," answered Caderousse. "You merely threw it. I saw it lying in a corner." "Hold your tongue, you fool. What should you know about it? Why, you were drunk." "Where is Fernand?" inquired Caderousse. "How do I know?" replied Danglars. "Gone, as every prudent man ought to be, to look after his own affairs, most likely. Never mind where he is. Let you and I go and see what is to be done for our poor friends." During this conversation, Dante, after having exchanged a cheerful shake of the hand with all his sympathizing friends, had surrendered himself to the officer sent to arrest him, merely saying, "Make yourselves quite easy, my good fellows. There is some little mistake to clear up. That's all. Depend upon it. And very likely I may not have to go so far as the prison to effect that." "Oh, to be sure," responded Danglars, who had now approached the group. "Nothing more than a mistake. I feel quite certain." Dante descended the staircase, preceded by the magistrate and followed by the soldiers. A carriage awaited him at the door. He got in, followed by two soldiers and the magistrate. and the vehicle drove off towards Marseille.
Adieu, adieu, dearest Edmond, cried Mercedes, stretching out her arms to him from the balcony.
The prisoner heard the cry, which sounded like the sob of a broken heart, and leaning from the coach, he called out,
Goodbye, Mercedes. We shall soon meet again.
Then the vehicle disappeared round one of the turnings of Fort Saint-Nicolas.
Wait for me here, all of you, cried Monsieur Morel. I will take the first conveyance I find and hurry to Marseille, whence I will bring you word how all is going on.
That's right, exclaimed a multitude of voices. Go, and return as quickly as you can. This second departure was followed by a long and fearful state of terrified silence on the part of those who were left behind. The old father and Mercedes remained for some time apart, each absorbed in grief. But at length the two poor victims of the same blow raised their eyes and, with simultaneous burst of feeling, rushed into each other's arms. Meanwhile, Fernand made his appearance, poured out for himself a glass of water with a trembling hand, then hastily swallowing it, went to sit down at the first vacant place, and this was, by mere chance, placed next to the seat on which poor Mercedes had fallen, half fainting. When released from the warm and affectionate embrace of old Dante, instinctively Fernand drew back his chair.
He is the cause of all this misery. I am quite sure of it,
whispered Caderousse, who had never taken his eyes off Fernand, to Danglars.
I don't think so, answered the other. He is too stupid to imagine such a scheme. I only hope the mischief will fall upon the head of whoever wrought it. You don't mention those who aided and abetted the deed, said Caderousse. Surely, answered Danglars, one cannot be held responsible for every chance arrow shot into the air. You can indeed, when the arrow lights point downward on somebody's head.
Meantime, the subject of the arrest was being canvassed in every different form.
What think you, Danglars, said one of the party, turning towards him, of this event?
Why, replied he, I think it just possible Dante may have been detected with some trifling article on board ship, considered here as a contraband.
But how could he have done so without your knowledge, Danglars, since you are the ship's supercargo?
Why, as for that, I could only know what I was told respecting the merchandise with which the vessel was laden. I know she was loaded with cotton, and that she took in her freight at Alexandria from Pastre's warehouse, and at Smyrna from Pascal's. That is all I was obliged to know, and I beg I may not be asked for any further particulars.
Now, I recollect, said the afflicted old father, my poor boy told me yesterday he had got a small case of coffee and another of tobacco for me.
There, you see, exclaimed Danglars, and now the mischief is out. Depend upon it, the custom-house people went rummaging about the ship in our absence, and discovered poor Dante's hidden treasures.
Mercedes, however, paid no heed to this explanation of her lover's arrest. Her grief, which she had hitherto tried to restrain, now burst out in a violent fit of hysterical sobbing.
Come, come, said the old man. Be comforted, my poor child. There is still hope.
Hope, repeated Danglars.
Hope,
faintly murmured Fernand, but the words seemed to die away on his pale, agitated lips, and a convulsive spasm passed over his countenance.
Good news, good news, shouted forth one of the party stationed in the balcony on the lookout. Here comes Monsieur Morel back. No doubt now we shall hear that our friend is released.
Mercedes and the old man rushed to meet the shipowner, and greeted him at the door. He was very pale.
What news?
Exclaimed a general burst of voices.
Alas, mes friends,
replied Monsieur Morel, with a mournful shake of his head.
The thing has assumed a more serious aspect than I expected."
"Oh, indeed, sir, he is innocent," sobbed forth Mercedes.
"That I believe," answered Monsieur Morel, "but still he is charged." "With what?" inquired the elder Dante. "With being an agent of the Bonapartist faction." And many of our readers may be able to recollect how formidable such an accusation became in the period at which our story is dated. A despairing cry escaped the pale lips of Mercedes. The old man sank into a chair.
"Ah, Danglars," whispered Caderousse, "you have deceived me. The trick you spoke of last night has been played. But I cannot suffer a poor old man or an innocent girl to die of grief through your fault. I am determined to tell them all about it."
"Be silent, you simpleton," cried Danglars, grasping him by the arm, "or I will not answer even for your own safety. Who can tell whether Dante be innocent or guilty? The vessel did touch at Elba, where he quitted it and passed a whole day in the island. Now, should any letters or other documents of a compromising character be found upon him, will it not be taken for granted that all who uphold him are his accomplice?" With the rapid instinct of selfishness, Caderousse readily perceived the solidity of this mode of reasoning. He gazed doubtfully, wistfully on Danglars, and then caution supplanted generosity. "Suppose we wait a while, and see what comes of it," said he, casting a bewildered look on his companion. "To be sure," answered Danglars, "let us wait, by all means. If he be innocent, of course he will be set at liberty. If guilty, why, it is no use involving ourselves in a conspiracy." "Let us go, then. I cannot stay here any longer." "With all my heart," replied Danglars, pleased to find the other so tractable. "Let us take ourselves out of the way, and leave things for the present to take their course." After their departure, Fernand, who had now again become the friend and protector of Mercedes, led the girl to her home, while the friends of Dante conducted the now half-fainting man back to his abode. The rumour of Edmond's arrest as a Bonapartist agent was not slow in circulating throughout the city.
"Could you ever have credited such a thing, my dear Danglars?"
asked Monsieur Morel, as on his return to the port for the purpose of gleaning fresh tidings of Dante from Monsieur de Villefort, the assistant procureur, he overtook his supercargo and Caderousse.
"Could you believe such a thing possible?"
"Why, you know I told you," replied Danglars, "that I considered the circumstance of his having anchored at the island of Elba as a very suspicious circumstance."
"And did you mention these suspicions to any person beside myself?"
"Certainly not," returned Danglars, then added in a low whisper, "You understand that on account of your uncle, Monsieur Policar Morel, who served under the other government, and who does not altogether conceal what he thinks on the subject, you are strongly suspected of regretting the abdication of Napoleon. I should have feared to injure both Edmond and yourself, had I divulged my own apprehensions to a soul. I am too well aware that, though a subordinate like myself is bound to acquaint the shipowner with everything that occurs, there are many things he ought most carefully to conceal from all else."
"'Tis well, Danglars, 'tis well," replied Monsieur Morel. "You are a worthy fellow, and I had already thought of your interests in the event of poor Edmond having become captain of the Fair One."
"Is it possible you were so kind?"
"Yes, indeed. I had previously inquired of Dante what was his opinion of you, and if he should have any reluctance to continue you in your post. For somehow I have perceived a sort of coolness between you."
"And what was his reply?"
"That he certainly did think he had given you offence in an affair which he merely referred to without entering into any particulars, but that whoever possessed the good opinion and confidence of the ship's owner would have his preference also. The hypocrite, murmured Danglars. Poor Dante, said Caderousse. No one can deny his being a noble-hearted young fellow. But meanwhile, continued Miss Morel, here is the Pharaon without a captain. Oh, replied Danglars, since we cannot leave this port for the next 3 months, let us hope that ere the expiration of that period, Dante will be set at liberty. No doubt, but in the meantime, I am entirely at your service, Monsieur Morel, answered Danglars. You know that I am as capable of managing a ship as the most experienced captain in the service, and it will be so far advantageous to you to accept my service that upon Edmond's release from prison no further change will be requisite on board the Pharaon than for Dante and myself each to resume our respective posts. Thanks, Danglars. That will smooth over all difficulty. I fully authorize you at once to assume the command of the Pharaon, and look carefully to the unloading of her freight. Private misfortune must never be allowed to interfere with business. Be easy on that score, Monsieur Morel. But do you think we shall be permitted to see our poor Edmond? I will let you know that directly. I have seen Monsieur de Villefort, whom I shall endeavour to interest in Edmond's favour. I am aware he is a furious royalist, but in spite of that, and of his being a king's attorney, he is a man like yourselves, and I fancy not a bad sort of one. Perhaps not, replied Danglars, but I hear that he is ambitious, and that's rather against him. Well, well, returned Monsieur Morel, we shall see. But now hasten on board. I will join you there ere long. So saying, the worthy shipowner quitted the two allies, and proceeded in the direction of the Palais de Justice. You see, said Danglars, addressing Caderousse, the turn things have taken. Do you still feel any desire to stand up in his defence? Not the slightest, but yet it seems to me a shocking thing that a mere joke should lead to such consequences. But who perpetrated that joke, let me ask? Neither you nor myself. But Fernand, you knew very well that I threw the paper into a corner of the room. Indeed, I fancied I had destroyed it. Oh no, replied Caderousse, that I can answer for you. You did not. I only wish I could see it now as plainly as I saw it lying all crushed and crumpled in a corner of the arbor. Well then, if you did, depend upon it, Fernand picked it up and either copied it or caused it to be copied. Perhaps even he did not take the trouble of recopying it. And now I think of it, by heavens, he may have sent the letter himself. Fortunately for me, the handwriting was disguised. Then you are aware of Dante being engaged in a conspiracy? Not I. As I before said, I thought the whole thing was a joke, nothing more. It seems, however, that I have unconsciously stumbled upon the truth. Still, argued Caderousse, I would give a great deal if nothing of the kind had happened, or at least that I had had no hand in it. You will see, Danglars, that it will turn out an unlucky job for both of us. Nonsense. If any harm come of it, it should fall on the guilty person, and that you know is Fernand. How can we be implicated in any way? All we have to do is to keep our own counsel and remain perfectly quiet, not breathing a word to any living soul. And you will see that the storm will pass away without in the least affecting us. Amen, responded Caderousse, waving his hand in token of adieu to Danglars, and bending his steps towards the Allée de Meilhan, moving his head to and fro, and muttering as he went,
after the manner of one whose mind was overcharged with one absorbing idea. "So far, then," said Danglars mentally, "all has gone as I would have it. I am temporarily commander of the Pharaon, with the certainty of being permanently so, if that fool of a Caderousse can be persuaded to hold his tongue. My only fear is the chance of Dante being released. But there, he is in the hands of justice. And," added he with a smile, "she will take her own." So saying, he leapt into a boat, desiring to be rowed on board the Pharaon, where Monsieur Morel had agreed to meet him. End of chapter 5.
Now you can see how the pieces, the familiar pieces, the pieces that you may already know from movies, are starting to fall into place. But don't let that fool you or lull you into complacency. Listener Christine had just written me about a zeitgeist moment with the Count of Monte Cristo from a couple of weeks ago, and I can't tell you everything that she sent me because we haven't gotten to that part yet. But one of the things that she said was that as soon as I announced the book that we were doing, she went out and she read it. And as with all of us, you know, the first time you read something, it's, especially if it's a fun book, you have a really great time and it's enjoyable and yay, books. But then if you go back and you read it again or listen to it on audiobook format or on Craftlit, there's all sorts of other stuff that you see. You often see things that I have missed because I'm focusing on one side of things, and you have the opportunity to kind of let all of this stuff filter in and make realizations of your own, which is why we love to have the caller line at 206-350-1642. If you are using the Craftlit app on a phone, you can look at the show notes on your phone and tap the phone number that appears at the top of the show notes, and that'll dial you directly to me. Well, to the voicemail, which gets to me, so it's the same thing, I guess. But Christine and I, we both had this same experience where as you're reading the book the first time, this chapter is nothing more than a turning point. An important one, absolutely. But, you know, okay, so Edmond Dantes gets dragged off. We know why. We know that Fernand took the letter. We know that Danglars wrote the letter in a way that his hand was disguised, so nobody will know that he wrote it. We know that the light of realization has dawned on Caderousse through his beer goggles, wine goggles. But we also know that this, because Edmond Dantes is innocent, this may not be the final straw. I mean, he may get taken down to the Crown prosecutor, who will look at the paperwork and say, oh, this is garbage. Give me the letter. What's going on? And maybe as simple as that. You know, clearly not from Edmond. It's clearly not his sympathies. All they have to do is interview all of the guys on the ship. And wasn't it sweet that all the guys from the ship are there celebrating with him, and Monsieur Morel shows up, and he's a mensch. We love this guy. But there doesn't seem to be a whole lot beyond that going on in this chapter. This is one of the ones to bookmark, because in going back over it again, after having made it all the way through the book and gone over bits and pieces of it several times, so much foreshadowing and important character information shows up in these first 5 chapters, which isn't a surprise because exposition, but it's also so heavily laden in this particular chapter. Information about Dante's character. And you talk about a writer who shows and doesn't tell. That is Dumas, because he's showing you so much. But going back to our 3 bad guys, it would be very simple to say, well, Edmond Dantes is being portrayed as the pure innocent, kind of like Darcy and Darnay in Tale of Two Cities. And the 3 bad guys are pure out-and-out baddie and nothing else. But that would be too simple, and it would be incorrect. You might be able to make a case that the three bad guys, if you add them up, they are three different kinds of bad. And the chances of you finding all three types in one guy would, well, it would give you Iago, I think. Somebody who's just bad, capital, holy cow, piece of psycho. And that's probably closer to the truth, that they are three different facets of different kinds of evil, from the kind of benign, just don't do anything evil, which would be Caderousse, all the way to the puppet master kind of evil, which would be Danglars. But if we look at those guys simply as that kind of foil for our good guy, that simplifies our good guy an awful lot. And I don't think Dante's is that simple. For example, we know that personally he doesn't like Danglars and that personally he doesn't trust Danglars. But when Morel confronted him and said, "Do you think he's doing a good job?" He said, "Yes. At his job, he is great." Now, honestly, if any of us really, really personally disliked someone we worked with, and a boss came to us and said, how's that guy working out? How's she doing? Would you not be ridiculously tempted to just say, not so well? Not that I've ever been in that situation, but I can certainly see that if somebody was feeding me the vibes that Danglars is letting off, I might think I was doing everyone a favor to get rid of someone like that. And maybe I would be. But Dantes is honest about his motives. There's the personal side of things, but that's personal. And then there's the business side of things. Danglars is clearly careful with money, has incredible attention to detail. Part of that is in his nosiness and apparently in looking for ways to screw other people. But that doesn't get in the way. In fact, it probably helps him doing a really good job where he has to know everything that's happening on board the ship. As we just saw, he's in a perfectly defensible position. You can't expect me to know where all the goods are that have been smuggled when I'm not involved in the smuggling. Kind of do get the sense that if stuff were being smuggled on board, he would know about it because he knew about Leclerc's letter and all of that. Regardless, I think that puts Dante in a different class from, say, Charles Darnay or any one of our other pick them male heroes from books, except maybe Rochester. Rochester's complicated too. We also know that while Edmund was furious with Caderousse for taking the money away from his father that his father was going to be living off of while Edmund was at sea, he also was able to take a step back, take a deep breath, and say, you know what, when I needed it, Caderousse came through and loaned me money. I need to be able to at least do the same for him. And Edmund is able to put aside any personal reactions to Caderousse, and Edmund knows he's winning. And I put that in air quotes. Mercedes loves him, but Fernand is young and good-looking and tough and has known Mercedes all her life, but Edmund he trusts Mercedes. And while all of these things appear to just be, wow, okay, so the subtext here is Edmund is virtuous, I take it a step further. Edmund is tough. Edmund is patient, is not afraid of doing the hard thing or doing the right thing. He tries, always, to see the best in people. And his loyalty to his father, to Mercedes, to Monsieur Morel, seems to be infinite. But Edmund doesn't insult Danglars or criticize Danglars in front of Morel professionally, as a professional in front of Morel. It's because he doesn't want to insult Morel either. And I think that sets him up as a much more interesting character than just, oh, he's young, he's good looking, he's a total innocent, and look at his deer in the headlight eyes. There's more going on under the surface. And once we get, I don't know, 50 chapters into the book, you're going to want to come back and listen to this one again, or the last two. It's fun. And now it's time for me to go. I hope you have a great week. I will talk to you soon. I wanted to thank you all for downloading and sharing the podcast, because while we were on hiatus, we passed the 3 millionth download mark, which is pretty exciting. And our next book, starting on the premium feed, is 3 Men in a Boat, to Say Nothing of the Dog, read for us by B.J. Harrison. It is going to be spectacular, but it is going to be a little late because this week was one of those weeks. All right, that's it for me. Take care. Have a great one. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. If you like getting free audiobooks with benefits every week, please consider supporting the show over at patreon.com/craftlit. There are rewards waiting for you beyond, the free podcast. You can also subscribe to our premium streaming audio by tapping the red lock when you are looking at the app or at the show notes at craftlit.libsyn.com/podcast. You can also sign up for a premium download subscription by following the links in the right-hand sidebar at craftlit.com. And if it's easier for you, you can always subscribe and review at iTunes and at Stitcher Radio. Like us on Facebook, support us at Patreon, and come with us on tour. For 9 years, Craftlit has been kept going by the support of you, the listener. And for that, I am truly grateful. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on